one of the exercises that we have at times provided our students is the opportunity to actually design a store. Now, this may sound kind of interesting from a conceptual standpoint, but once again, let's think about this. They've just completed this very, very exhaustive list of all the things they like in a store. Oh, I want it clean, I want it well lit, I want it convenient, I want good parking, I want it safe, all of those things. And now we're going to ask them to say, well, if you had a store, what would it look like? Let's actually design a store. Now, there is one caveat to this. The idea of store or storefront has different contexts in different environments. For instance, in North America, if we were to say design a store, people are going to think of a fairly large, open space, brick and mortar facility, something with glass and doors and counters and shelves and what have you. If we're in East Africa and we talk about a store, we may literally be talking about some small, very physically small presence, a facility. It may be something as small as a shipping container that's utilized as a place of commerce and trade. If we go into perhaps other areas in China, for instance, the concept of store and the hospitalities of the store there are going to take on different physicalities. But all of these examples of store have two things that are in common. Number one, they need to be inviting to the customer. In other words, those things that customers want and expect need to be exemplified in that store or that storefront facade. Second of all, they also not only visually have to be attractive, but they have to meet the practical needs of the consumer they're trying to reach. And we develop in some ways try to get our participants to understand that in a deeper way. And again, we do that by simply putting them back and forth between, okay, if you were your customer and you were going into your own store, what would you want to see? How would you like for it to look? What product would you like to see first? Is there a particular sale that's going on that as a consumer might appeal to you? Where would you put that? How would you arrange the store? And again, just for instance, in a North American context, we give our participants a choice of 5 stores to design. We sort of contain them a little bit. For instance, a family shoe store. That means shoes sold for all ages, both men and women, children. A furniture store. A sporting goods store. And one thing, if I could make a note quickly here about sporting goods. Sporting goods stores in North America are localized. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if we were looking at a sporting goods store in Southern California, they're going to have swimsuits and surfboards, ski equipment and wind kites, all those types of things for the outdoors. However, if we were in Chicago and we were talking about a sporting goods store, we would be talking about lake fishing equipment and things that would be for ice fishing and stuff like that because it gets cold in the wintertime. So that adds an extra dimension of understanding to the student about being able to pick a location and then localize that store for their particular location they've picked. And so we work with them in that case as well. We also go to a hardware store, and this means nuts, bolts, screws, lumber, all those kinds of things that are found in a hardware store. Finally, we use a women's clothing store. And in this context, each of, and again, as I have not said up until this time, this is obvious. If you have a small group, you can do this on an individualized basis, each individual making and designing their own store. What is also important is if you have a larger group and you're constrained by time, go in and put teams together, 2 to 3 people to help them work through collaterally and together to work on a design of a store. One other thing that's also important about this one exercise is that we ask them to brand the store, create a logo, and name the store. Now this is interesting to watch, and it's even more interesting to watch the interaction between the team members as they're involved in this and going through this process. The dynamics that take place about how they formulate their idea and how they want to present their idea can be fascinating. And this is one point when you really get a glimpse or a glimmer of how, in fact, brilliant and how very engaging even lower literacy or lower education level audiences can be. They're thrilled about the idea of the ownership of the name and the identity going with the store. And they show a great deal of enthusiasm and thinking out of the box in terms of trying to name their store. So this is an opportunity that I think can hardly say is not worth taking. I think it is worth the time to take to do this. Again, and expect 20 to 25 minutes to get this exercise done. So, creating the store, understanding what they want as consumers, what do you like, what do you not like, what would you always do in a store context, what would you never do? These are all questions that get formulated up around creating the store and understanding that aspect of consumer behavior. Once you've completed that exercise, next we start honing in on the idea of them as a consumer. Remember, we start with the very top level, broad, general, and now we're starting to narrow the focus down for them a little bit. Entirely building their competence and confidence in the knowledge that they have brought forth.